Okay, I have time to begin, so we'll go ahead and get started. Talk just a little bit before we start. I really enjoyed our last time together and appreciated the questions that you asked. And I'm unfortunately not going to be able to help much on the apartment history. I did not turn up much there. But I do appreciate the input and the questions and hope that you'll continue to do that today. I'm going to begin by talking about Bill and Leanne Russell for just a little bit and show you a couple of short films that we've made for the biology division. And then after that, we'll stop and talk about what our next directions might be and what we want to accomplish while we're here together today. So let me start uh, with those two videos. Now, I'll begin as I normally do. I'll begin with just a very brief outline of me, just so you know if anyone's here who hadn't been here before. That I was born in Middle Tennessee, married my high school sweetheart. I'm a Vietnam veteran. And in Oak Ridge, I said today, and that was last week, I was actually speaking on the 14th of September. I got to talk to a class at a university in Virginia. And it was on that day, that was my 50th anniversary. I hired in on September the 14th, 1970. And then, by the way, I had next day I had an opportunity to speak to a class in Texas A&M University. So we're spreading the word about Oak Ridge to a couple of universities in the last week. Retired from Y12 and a historian for the city of Oak Ridge, commissioner on the Tennessee Historical Commission, elder at Highland View, and a chaplain for the Oak Ridge Police Department. Bill and Leanne Russell are two of the eminent scientists that we had, really great scientists that came to Oak Ridge. They came here in 1947. They came as a husband and wife team. They were hired as they were beginning the biology division. Leanne talked to me about when they first came, how they were housed over at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. At that time, it was just getting started, and they were trying to start the biology division. And they just didn't have room over there to do what needed to be done. So they started looking at empty buildings at Y12, and they were able to convince themselves and others that those large buildings that were built had just been completed right before the war ended at what we now call the biology complex. And oh, by the way, they are almost ready to begin demolition on the rest of those buildings in that complex. Some of them are taken down, and the rest of them will probably come down within a year. But they were able to work out an arrangement where they could put a fence around that area, and you'll see that in the documentary film. We'll talk about that just a little. And they occupied those buildings. Her office, Leanne's office, was in building 9210, and I'm sure Bill's was as well. They occupied those facilities for a number of years, had the leading world-class biology research center there. And oh, by the way, there's another side to their story that is not told much in the documentary, because we're focusing on the biology division. But they also were the founders of the Tennessee Citizens for Wilderness Planning. Now, an interesting little story that I learned from Steve Oliphant just within the past year is how that initial interest on the part of Bill and Leanne came to be. It seems that they were frequently looking on the north side of Black Oak Ridge, and they were trails even back then were already started along the ridge and on the north side where the trail, North Ridge Trail is today. And they saw some little markers in the woods, some flags that had been placed up, and it caused them to wonder what is going on here. Why are these little flags marking a straight line on the backside or north side of that ridge? And they learned that there was a plan in place to put a power line in there that would take a large section of that wooded area out. And they didn't think that was a good idea. They thought that should not happen. So they began to resist it. They began to look for ways to point out that there ought to be other ways to run electrical power and not have to go through those woods. And according to Steve, that's what started them on the route of the concern for the environment, to the extent that they ultimately helped to create the Obed Wild and Scenic River and the Big South Fork National Recreation Area. And so there's multiple legacies associated with Bill and Leanne Russell. But we're going to focus on their involvement in the biology division. So let's see if we can watch this video together.
From modest and humble beginnings to secret missions to being one of America's best resources for new technology, these valleys in East Tennessee have a rich and diverse history. We want to honor those who came before us. We want to keep our place in history alive by revealing the secrets of our hidden past. In 1946, the Second World War had ended, a war that Y-12 worked tirelessly to help end. In spite of its efforts to help win the war, Y-12's whole existence was threatened. You see, the K-25 gaseous diffusion process had come to be regarded as more productive for enriching uranium, more productive than Y-12's wartime calutrons. The once booming Y-12 quickly went from over 22,000 employees down to less than 2,000, and many buildings were left vacant. Just over Chestnut Ridge, a sister facility was facing its own set of challenges after the war. X-10 had just become a national lab, the Clinton National Laboratory to be exact, and was well on its way to becoming the Oak Ridge National Laboratory that we know today. And then there was the fashioning of a whole new division, a division that would be focused on research and study the effects of radiation on living things, on organisms like fungi, plants, mammals, insects, a biology division. And for the director of this new division, the then director of research and development at the Clinton Labs, Dr. Eugene Wigner, looked to the National Institute of Health.
They were trying to find somebody, and they asked some people at the National Institute of Health about it, and nobody was interested, but Hollander was interested and came up with a program immediately about particularly genetic research, and sure enough, they funded it.
Turned out Dr. Alexander Hollander was the perfect choice. A German immigrant, he already knew a thing or two about radiation and living things. He'd been working on research of his own, studying the effects of ultraviolet radiation on organisms. He was driven, focused, and a visionary. Hollander sized a research facility for all things biological and biomedical that shared ideas and findings, a research facility that collaborated with researchers around the world. But for a research facility of this size, well, X10 found himself in quite a quandary. There just wasn't any space available or money for new construction. Money was tight following World War II for all government facilities, and so building a new building for a new division simply was not an option.
And they didn't have much room over here at Oricl, but they did have a lot of buildings over at Y12. And when the war effort winded down, those buildings were vacated. And so it made a perfect opportunity for a growing research division to expand into that area.
Buildings like 9207, 9208, 9210, and 9211 that were once used to prepare material for the Y12 Calutrons were left vacant and were big enough to accommodate this new biological research division for the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. But of course, security was tight at Y12, and this posed a problem for the new division. But sensible German Hollander had a solution for that.
Alex was trying to negotiate for the use of a building. Finally, he yelled, "Well, why can't you build a fence around us?" That made it a done deal. He got that building and the adjacent one, both surrounded by a security fence.
But these buildings weren't intended for biological research, so some renovations were needed. But Hollander had already started assembling his team, so he found temporary labs for those researchers to begin work.
It was in a wing of the building that also housed the original X-Tank cafeteria. We only had just maybe 3 or 4 rooms, maybe more than that in the wing. And the end room became the mouse room. And all of it was a very temporary housing. We knew we were going to be moving, so it didn't much matter.
Slowly, as renovations were finished, each team of researchers would move into their new facilities.
The rest of the biology division moved before we did because their facilities were in a different building and they had been completed before ours. Our particular group moved in probably January of 1949. We moved into building 9210.
And so began the renowned Oak Ridge National Laboratory's Biology Division and the fantastic discoveries that would change the world of science and medicine forever. Research done here in the Bear Creek Valley at Y12.
Okay, let's watch the second part now.
It was the early 1950s. The nation was at rest following its greatest war. But in the quiet valleys of East Tennessee, a small group of scientists was beginning to cause quite a stir. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory was pioneering research on living things. Only this research wasn't happening at the lab itself. It was taking place on the other side of Chestnut Ridge at Y12. In buildings donated to the lab by Y12, the new biology division found a home. It was here at Y12 where some great scientific minds assembled that Oricl became a world leader in biological research. Some of the early breakthroughs came from the persistent efforts of a hard-working husband and wife team. Working in a building nicknamed the Mouse House, Doctors Bill and Leanne Russell were studying how radiation affects reproduction in mammals. While Bill studied these effects on reproductive cells, Leanne focused on the effects in the earliest stages of life.
I was getting involved in mapping out the developmental stages, embryonic developmental stages, at which you would get different types and different degrees and different frequencies of various malformations, like, you know, legs and toes and ribs and all that kind of stuff, making the correspondence between the timing of mouse embryos and human embryos. It turned out that some of the really hazardous stages were during a time when most women would not realize that they were pregnant. And so we made this recommendation that if radiation could be postponed, like if it was a diagnostic radiation, that it should be scheduled to the 2 weeks following menstrual period. So that became known as the 14-day rule. Some people call it the 10-day rule. And it was adopted fairly early, like in the 50s. And it's been internationally in use ever since then.
For the 50 years that followed, the 14-day rule has helped prevent millions of potential birth defects. The other Dr. Russell, Bill, is not here to tell us about his research, but his legacy lives on.
I think his very early work was wonderful, the one with ovarian transplantation. But after he got here, I think finding the various conditions that changed mutation rates were what he considered most significant. Another very so-called dose rate effect, namely that if you spread out the dose instead of giving it all in one shot, that the mutation rate dropped to about 1/3.
This discovery led to the national and international standards for safe levels of radiation exposure for humans that we still use today. Now, during this time, another scientist was getting some notice, putting things on ice. Dr. Peter Mazur's specialty was cryobiology.
Cryobiology is the scientific study of the effect of cold on living organisms. People had attempted to freeze embryos and eggs, but had gotten absolutely nowhere. And so we were beginning to understand the factors under which cells were killed or not killed. So we took the knowledge we had and said, well, it seems to us this is the way we ought to do it. Try it. And it was a pretty heady experience because we tried 2 experiments, and in those 2 experiments solved the problem basically in 10 days. And the test of whether you successfully frozen embryos is to transfer them into a foster mother, a surrogate, see if you get baby mice. And lo and behold, we got baby mice. In fact, those baby mice appeared on the cover of Science magazine in October 1972.
In similar research, Mazur and his team successfully froze sperm that was later injected into a female mouse, and the pregnancy took. This technique was quickly adopted by the livestock industry.
In 2008, I think it was, the cattle industry froze 250 million doses of bull sperm, and those were used to inseminate 100 million cows over the world, and this resulted in a tremendous increase in the genetic productivity of cattle.
These discoveries create even more possibilities for the future, like preserving organs for transplant and preserving endangered animals. These are but a few of the snapshots of contributions made by Oricl's biology division, contributions that have left a long legacy made here at Y12.
All right, I hope you enjoyed those two short videos about the biology division. Are there any of you on here today that worked at the biology, in the biology division? Be unusual if we don't have someone who had some connection to it. Well, maybe not. It was really a world-renowned uh, organization for a long while. They moved out of Y12 and a number of years ago, and moved into a new facility at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, actually named
Right.
and Leanne Russell. Yes, Baxter.
I didn't work there, but my sister-in-law started in the Mouse House as a secretary when I think she was like 20 years old. She was young and out of college, but she was secretary for the Russells.
Oh,
And she said every morning when you came in, it was usually open the drawer and throw out a mouse that got in there somehow. Or she would call somebody if it was a bunch of them and get them out. But she said you kind of got used to the smell after a while, but after that it was fine. But she just said it was every morning was a surprise.
I can imagine that there were thousands, tens of thousands of mice in that
Oh
facility.
yeah.
And the odor is something that everyone talks about who ever went in that building. And they tried to convince everyone, and I had the same experience. Tried to convince us that it was the smell of the food that they fed the mice that you were smelling. I'm not sure that was true. I'm not sure what that odor was. But I'll bet you if you went in that building even today, you'd probably still have a lingering odor. But after a number of years, the Department of Energy decided to get out of that business, and they transferred the operation, I believe, to the University of North Carolina. Is where I think it went. And another interesting thing is when they moved from Y12 over to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, they literally did not take any mice with them. They froze the embryos of a number of their mice and took those frozen embryos and moved them, not the actual adult mice. Any other question about the biology division, or any other comment, any other connection that we might make to it? Okay.
This is Lee Smalley. I worked with Paul Selby in the Mouse House for a number of years. They had a project going where they were studying the development of cataracts in mice after various degrees of radiation exposure. And they needed someone who could diagnose a cataract. So we set up a slit lamp, which is designed for the human head to sit into. And Paul would hold the mice in front of that slit lamp, and so I gradually got the hang of diagnosing cataracts in mice for his paper. And so I was unpaid, but my name cited in his paper at one point. This was 30 years ago, probably.
That's interesting. That just shows you what's typical about Oak Ridge. Things like that can happen here, and cutting edge research that's going on daily, and people are being involved in. That's very interesting.
Yeah, the hardest part of the job was getting through security into the Mouse House at the Y12 location. Both at the gate, and again, Paul had to come out and meet me in the parking lot and escort me into the building.
I can imagine that no one would believe I'm going in to look at cataracts on mice. I mean, unusual. Speaking of cataracts, Lee, I had the opportunity back in February to be invited And if I've told you all this story, please bear with me. I love to tell. But I was invited to a round table in Vail, Colorado. What happened is in August of last year, I had a call, as I normally do. I do a number of tours every year in Oak Ridge, and this one came in and said, I have a group that's coming, just 8 people, and they want you to meet them in the parking lot of AMSI and give them a tour of Oak Ridge. Sure, I'll do that. So I did, and when I got there, they drove up in a Mercedes van and were being driven by a chauffeur. So I said, "Oh, Ray, you got an unusual one here." And when I got in, the first thing they wanted to do was to have lunch, and they'd already made reservations at Calhoun's. And my second hint that this is something quite different is they had rented the entire event facility for one table of sandwiches for lunch for 8 people. So I thought, oh my, this is an unusual set of circumstances here. So we had the tour, and they seemed to enjoy it. And when we finished, I thought, that's the end of that. I had an unusual tour, met some interesting people. And then in January, I got an email from the lady that had set the tour up saying that the person who arranged the tour wanted to invite Fanny and me to come to Vail the last week of February for a roundtable of about 25 people. And I thought, my goodness, I don't know, I better check into this and see who this guy is. So I Googled him to figure out what was really going on. And it seems that he's retired, but he'd been in financial business for years and was obviously pretty well off. And she told me, said, if you'll just get out here, we'll take care of everything else. We'll pay for your hotel and all your food and everything. So Fanny and I had frequent flyer miles, so we just went. When we got out there, we met with 20 other people about that he had run into during the year that he thought had interesting enough background and stories to come together in his garage. Now, he set a tent up in his garage. Vail, Colorado in February, lots of snow. But he set that tent up and it extended out of his garage, and he had heaters in it so that it was comfortable. And we had a round table there. Now, we would do that round table. We would have breakfast in his home and then do the round table all morning. And at 12:30, we would do something in Vail, go skiing or go on a snowmobile or sleds or whatever, do something in the afternoon and then come back for round table that night. Now, I've told you all this because I really enjoyed meeting all of these various people that had been brought there. There were Blue Angel pilots out of the Navy. There was a Navy SEAL, the one who had actually been the commander of SEAL Team 6. Billy Kidd, one of the Olympic skiers, was there. And there was a doctor there, Lee, this is where I'm getting to. There was a doctor there that did cataract surgery, and he specialized in cataract, and he went to Nepal on an annual basis and would do cataract surgery in the field. And he said it was a most amazing thing. These people who just could not see because of severely advanced cataract, when he would do that surgery, all of a sudden they could see. So, you know, he was just a god to them, if you will, because he was giving them sight. But cataract surgery has really become it's pretty commonplace now, I know, and lots of people really do appreciate getting their sight. But can you imagine these people who living in areas that would never have that opportunity if it wasn't for somebody like him going there? The other
Don't
thing,
get me started.
yeah. The other thing that I'll tell you is a week after we left, 2 weeks after we left, in the middle of March, when the COVID pandemic started really ramping up, we had an email that one of the individuals who was at the roundtable had been taken with the virus and actually died 2 weeks later. And that individual had been a man that we had had dinner with. Fanny had sat and talked with him. And Fanny's very susceptible. She has a lung condition and sarcoidosis, and we cannot afford to have her exposed. But obviously he was exposed after we left out there. And you also know, you all remember, many of you know Joe Linhart. Joe was my next door neighbor. I had the honor of knowing him for, well, 30 years that we've been living there. The last 2 years, he had gotten to the point where he couldn't drive, and I was fortunate enough to be able to give him rides and enjoyed spending time with him. But he was in the nursing home that had just been in there a couple of months, that had 20 people come down with the virus, and he was the one that passed away. So this COVID virus it's an awful thing that's had terrible impact on a lot of us. But we now Zoom more than we ever did, I'm sure, before having a situation like this. And it's good that we're figuring out ways to safely continue enjoying our history together. What else would you like to focus on today? Let's take just a minute and let some of you ask some questions or indicate some interest in the direction you'd like to see us go. I've got a backup plan if you don't come up with something. So if you want to go the direction you want to go, give me some ideas and we'll go down it, okay? Yes.
Where exactly at the ORNL site did the biology division move to?
They built a new facility, I believe, on the west end of the laboratory. Somebody on here may know more about that than I do, but I think they built a new facility for them on the west end of the laboratory.
Somewhere near where the original engineering buildings were?
Yes, I think you're right. I think that's where it is, where it was.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what the building's being used for now, but I think that's where it was built. Anyone else? Yes. Oh, I thought she was holding her hand up.
Well, Ray, what are some thoughts about the future of Oak Ridge?
Well, thank you.
Seem to be an on.
Thank you for asking that. I'd be glad to think about that with you for a few minutes. And have I shown you the latest video of the construction of the uranium processing facility? Have you all seen that? If you've not, I'm going to run it for you, and just to kind of give you some visuals of what's actually going on at Y12 now in this construction. So, and then I'll talk more, and I want to talk about heritage tourism and what we're doing there. And we'll come back to that. But let's look at the uranium processing facility construction. And it's a time-lapse video, and it's got crazy music with it, but you'll look at, just tolerate the music and look at the visual of what's being done out there. All right, let's get that one. That one. And Yeah.
Don't have sound.
Look that much construction.
Okay, that that shows you that video is probably pushing a year old now. You saw that September 9th, 2019 date on it, so it's I need to get an update on that. But that is that's construction, largest construction project in the history of the state of Tennessee since the Manhattan Project. Going on right there, just across the ridge from where we are. So there's lots of things going on there. Y12 is changing. As I mentioned, the biology division buildings will be coming down within another year. And there's plans being made. I've been able to participate in some of the discussions about some of the buildings there that are being considered, some of the Calutron buildings that are being considered for demolition, being prepared. The only one that will be left permanently will be building 9204-3, Beta 3, that still has the original Calutrons in it. And that's a part of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park.
Hey, Ray,
731. Yes, ma'am.
what's happening with downtown and where do we stand with the airport?
Okay. The downtown area, I don't know if you're aware, they've been having Friday afternoon get-together on the street, on Wilson Street. And there is some increased interest in developing that area. Of course, the key is to get some private developer that wants to put some money into that. And, the plans are there. They are moving ahead with encouraging those kind of people to be interested, to get interested in construction there. So while the plans look good and while the enthusiasm remains, the money's not there yet to see any real construction. But that still is a very high priority on the part of the city planners. Wayne Glacier is leading the effort there from the community development standpoint. And as you may well know, the city has taken on the airport project. We had a briefing from our city manager, Mark Watson, that in the last, I don't know, couple of weeks, they've actually taken that project, the city's taken that project and is moving ahead with it. The plans are that it will be a reality out at the K-25 East Tennessee Technology Park. It will become a reality out there. And I think we're still looking at a good 2 to 3 years before you'll see the actual airport there. That's just my guess. I don't have anything to base that on, but it's going to come. That help?
Ray, can you speak to the racetrack being proposed for Horizon Center?
I can slightly, just a little. I only know what I've read in the paper, what I've heard discussed. I'm not involved in any direct way, but I do know that the plans seem to be at this time to move that racetrack forward in the Horizon Center. And that there's obviously, but it seems to be moving ahead. And again, going to become a reality as well. I talked about wanting to talk about the future with regard to our museums and heritage tourism. So let me address that a little bit. I think we talked about it before, but let's do it again. I have an appointment tomorrow, and then one on Tuesday of next week. The appointment tomorrow is to be interviewed by a documentary television group that are doing a documentary on Oak Ridge, focusing on our museums. So we're going to do the interview in the Oak Ridge History Museum, and I hope that will give us some national exposure on the value of the museums that we have. The one that's scheduled for next week, next Tuesday, is one to promote the American Museum of Science and Energy. And we are hoping to get that museum open again in the not too distant future, along with the K-25 History Center, which is a great resource that we opened the last week in February, the week I was in Vail, Colorado. But they went ahead and opened it without me, which I'm glad of. But that facility has just an exceptionally well done set of exhibits, and it tells the history of the K-25 gaseous diffusion plant really well. So I'm anxious to get that open again and get more people in there. By the way, there's a development on that K-25 site on the future plans for the historical interpretation. You know, the footprint is just north of the History Center there on the second floor of the fire department. They're almost ready to build what they call the equipment building. I'm trying to, we need to have a better name for it than that. But they're going to start building that building with some replica equipment in it. And then they're going to build another exhibit area. There had been plans to discussion of plans to build a viewing tower to be able to see that footprint. Well, plans have changed. The footprint is not being preserved to the extent that we had hoped originally. We had hoped that we would have laser lights or something that would give an impression of how large that building was. But I'm afraid that that's not in the works. Well, that hadn't been in the works for a long while. And now the viewing tower is not going to be built either. What is going to happen is there's going to be a one-story building with a lot of visuals about the original K-25 building and all of the other gaseous diffusion buildings. So you'll be able to see the replicas in a building that has a slice, it has a withdrawal alley, and has the equipment, the replicas of the equipment there. And then experience an interactive, highly interactive facility that will give you much more appreciation and understanding of the original structure. Now there's still going to be the footprint there, but it's just not going to be as impressive as we had hoped, because they've had to remove a lot of the concrete and a lot of the footprint it's there if you know what you're looking at, but it's not prominent like we had hoped it might be. And of course, the National Park will be involved in developing some of those displays as well. That'll be out there. Looking forward to that. I think we're a couple of years away from actually seeing the end products being developed there as well. Now, the Children's Museum is open now 3 days a week, and the National Park has their visitor contact location there in the main lobby of the Children's Museum. And the Y12 History Center is not accessible right now. If they go to their phase 3, they're in phase 2 now of their return from their response to the COVID. When they get to phase 3, that will again be open to and available for the public. And the bus tours will get started back up at some point. They're trying to figure out how to do those as well. But that's a little reiteration of something that we talked about earlier, but I think it's important to know the status of what we're doing in heritage tourism. Katie Watt is also developing some promotional information and videos that will help to promote tourism into the city. And at some point, we're going to put some national park signs out on the interstate. Now, we better be ready, because when we do that, we're going to see a lot of people coming off of that interstate to stop in Oak Ridge. So we ought to be ready to take care of that. What other questions do you have? Well, I didn't mention the Oak Ridge History Museum. I should do that. It's closed as well right now, but we're hoping to get it open soon too. It's done an outstanding job of pulling in the history of the city of Oak Ridge that we actually did not carry with us over to Amity. And they have obtained a state grant of some $80,000 to renovate that building. They've installed a security system. They've installed lighting, special lighting for each of the exhibits that they have. And they've used this time of shutdown to do the installation of those systems. And I think the museum's going to be a really good showplace when we're able to open it again. Again, hoping that's going to be in the not too distant future as well. Anyone have anything else about the future that they're either aware of or would like to ask a question about? I saw in the paper where the mayor has suggested that we ought to have the Y12 contract separated from the Pantex contract. I think that's an interesting observation that, and I believe he's correct. I think the emphasis on that large contract, very large contract, when they pulled them together, both Pantex and Bridge, it diluted the attention that we had to Oak Ridge. And I think he's right that we ought to stress the need to have a dedicated contract here. That's another element of the future. We're still a very much a government town that relies on the Department of Energy facilities here. We do have some things that are coming our way that help to diversify our economic development areas. I can't remember the exact name of the company that's building on Duck Island out near, it's a radioisotope company that'll be developing out there at the East Tennessee Technology Park site. And I believe that's moving ahead as well.
Ray, you mentioned a personal episode of the virus 19.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything that puts Oak Ridge City itself in context with the cases in the county or statewide? Is there anything coming out that clarifies, or is it all mixed in with all the rest of the county and state statistics?
I'm not aware of anything that's unique to Oak Ridge. I think the best we can do is look at the Anderson and Roane County statistics. And the curve is coming over and down. The statewide statistics are the same, even Knox County. But I think looking at Knox and Anderson and Roane is the closest we can get. If there is anything that's unique to the city, I'm not aware of it, but there could very well be and me not be aware of it. But as we've been monitoring it from a church standpoint, deciding, and we started back some, I guess, 3 weeks ago in a controlled, what we hope to be a safe environment. And by the way, we just had to close down our food distribution for a few days because one of the men working in it, his wife was tested positive. So we don't want to take any chances there. So we're waiting on the results from his test to see if in fact he is negative, which we hope will be the case. But we've watched the Anderson County and Roane County statistics, and that's what we've made our decision based on that, and Knox County, because we have people living in all three of those counties that come to church there. But I don't know anything specific to Oak Ridge, sorry. Anyone else know anything that might help there?
Well, the only thing I read recently was some of the experts are, this is not about Oak Ridge, it's about the big picture. Some of the experts say that it took us 7 or 8 months for the numbers that we have that have passed away to deal with the disease, but they think another same number might happen in the next 3 months. And that's probably all about the flu season coming on at the same time as virus 19. And so I hope those predictions don't hold true. That would mean people will be passing away about twice as fast as they have so far, roughly twice as many. But that's a good incentive for more people to wear a mask and do the best of what they know to do. And I'm not sure everybody's doing that all across the state, but that's what we hope for, I guess. It's hard to decide whether to be a pessimist or an optimist, but I guess we need to be an optimist along about these times and do our best.
I think it's hard. You're right. Trying to be a realist is the most difficult because there's so much misinformation that's out there and so much emphasis on do this or do that or do the other. I agree with you. Social distancing and wearing masks and keeping your hands and face clean is, I think, good things that we need to be doing. But you're right, the flu season will be on us soon, and I'm afraid that as weather changes that we'll see even more increase in the COVID-19 too.
Thank you, Ray.
Yeah. I have another video that I'll share.
Ray,
Yes, please.
Ray, this is Becky Rushton. Becky Rushton.
Okay.
I would just like to, as kind of the cap on the discussion about how we probably are going to be staying socially distanced for several more months, that Oricl is working very hard to bring more quality opportunities to our membership. So if you have anything that you would like to see Oricl do, or if you have a skill or an interest that you'd like to volunteer to share with other Oricl members. I'm on the curriculum committee, and we sure would love to hear about it and urge you to stay distant and keep exercising your brain with Oricl.
Oh, thank you for that. I just completed my form responding to the Oricl request to do more stories from the Secret City sessions for the winter and spring session. I thoroughly enjoy these. I know that I'm repeating myself in some of them, and I ask your indulgence there. But having these sessions, the Zoom sessions, have been tremendous for me. I thoroughly enjoy that opportunity of getting together. And I think I would, if you don't have any other questions, I've got enough time that since I introduced that story about Vail, Colorado to you, I'd like to show you just a few images from that trip that we made that I think will make you appreciate the interest in Oak Ridge and Oak Ridge history. So give me just a moment and I will share just a few snapshots of that time together. All right around, baby. Is that okay? All right. No hearing anyone object. Here we go. Okay, that's Vail, Colorado, February 26th through March the 1st. And first it started out with that history tour that I do and the people that I take on the tours. Everything from bus tours to families. Typical Oak Ridge tours, I'll take them up to the Alexander Guest House, the Friendship Bell, the Chapel on the Hill, and inside the guest house there. And then here we are in the History Museum. And this is the group that I was telling you about. It's not my typical tour, just 8 people. And we're sitting there now with them watching the Ed Westcott doc. Now we went to the round table, and this is inside that tent, inside his 2 double garage. And everything was taken care of except us getting there. And we had the round table twice each day inside that garage. It went from 8 to 12 and then 4:30 to 7 at night. Uniqueness of each individual. It's amazing, amazing people there. This is the Billy Kidd, the Olympic gold medal skier that I talked to you about. There he is making his presentation. Each one of us got about an hour to talk to the roundtable group about our particular interests or the special areas. Some of those individuals, the man standing in the middle is the person who put on the roundtable. The one next to him on his left is a Blue Angel, retired Blue Angel pilot. The one next to him in the blue sitting there is the commander of the SEAL Team 6. Amazing people. Those are the ski slopes at Vail. It's over from a mountain across the Vail's down in the valley, and those are the slopes. Then the evening entertainment, we would have music. That's a SEAL team member who's in a wheelchair. And notice the young girl that doesn't have any lower portion of her legs. I'll talk about her in a second. That young lady is a Russian, adopted Russian young girl who was born with birth defects. Her lower legs did not develop. At age 14, she made the decision to have them amputated. And she's a multi-sport featured challenged athlete. She plays for the Mighty Ducks, I believe, ice hockey team in California. Amazing group of people. Those are the kind of folks, a marketing professional, fellow of the Explorer Club and Royal Geographical Society, a world-renowned underwater explorer, a magician and his wife. He stole my watch without me knowing it. The 16-year-old Russian girl. The Colombian director of the largest petroleum company in Colombia, former lead solo pilot for the Blue Angels. I wear a blue band now that says glad to be here as a bracelet. I've never worn a bracelet in my life, but I do now. So every time the Blue Angels finish a show, when they come in for their debrief, the first thing they say to one another is, "I'm just glad to be here." So I wear that. The Nashville guitar manufacturer were the largest dealers of vintage and used guitars in the world. Gruen is his name, George Gruen. Zookeeper at the Denver Zoo, first American man to earn an Olympic gold medal in alpine skiing, Billy Kidd. Man who unearthed the largest dinosaur ever found was there. Retired commander of SEAL Team 6. The one that was in the wheelchair is a retired Navy SEAL. He told us how he was injured on a mission and lost the use of his legs. the medical executive vice president for medical affairs, system chief clinical officer of the Catholic Health Services of Long Island. Now, we're still in touch with these people. We do Zoom meetings with them, and he's been right in the middle of dealing with the COVID up in New York City. The founder of the tea company, Celestial Seasoning, sculptor of natural history and prehistoric life models for museums, founder and chairman of the Himalayan Cataract Project. Lee, that's the one that I was talking to you about. Chair of the Mayo Clinic Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. Again, amazing people. And then an aerobatic pilot, recognized as a legendary aviator, Emmy Award-winning television and film producer, a Las Vegas musician, who's a magician, who's now a consultant for the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and who once picked a pocket of President Carter's Secret Service staff, getting the visit itinerary, their badges, and the keys to the motorcade without them knowing it. A lifelong student of magic and sleight of hand who shot the bullet that David Blaine caught in his mouth. If you've ever seen that on YouTube, this is the guy that shot the bullet that he caught in a cup, a metal cup in his mouth. And Ray and Fanny Smith. I talked about Oak Ridge history, and Fanny talked about dose estimates for radiation accidents. Amazing opportunity that we had. And now all of these amazing people know and understand about Oak Ridge. I'm not sure they could have even spelled it before. So glad to be here. And then I talked about Bob Lazier. He's the one that had the COVID. He's shown here with Scott Carpenter, Barry Clifford, and Bob is on the end to the right. And he was his son is there with him, and he was into racing. And we're using Zoom meetings to stay in touch. Now, let me get out of this and tell you that I just consumed the rest of our time. But I do appreciate having this time with you. I hope you'll join me again next Wednesday. What I have planned for then will be a virtual tour through Building 9731 that I believe we'll soon have on the bus tour and soon have available for people to go through, more than they are right now. And Beta 3, we'll have a virtual tour of Beta 3 as well. Thank you all very much for coming today, and I've enjoyed the time with you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You bet. Glad
Well done, Ray. Well done.
Appreciate it.
Very well done.
Thank you.